Hello, everyone. My name is Shane McElroy, and welcome to all of you joining us on our second webinar in our series of 3 Momentum for Milk live webinars happening this week in advance of the new milking season. We have 2 really important topics that we'll cover off for you today in the form of calf rearing and managing the transition cow. So Joris Summers and Willie Darmody from the Tyrlawn Farm team will bring us through some of the key pointers towards managing the health and nutrition of cows and calves over the coming weeks to get the new season off to the best start. For today's interactive session, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions from our technical experts on how to manage these areas. So we'll first have a short presentation from Joris and Willie, and then that'll be followed by the Q&A session. And we'd encourage everyone on the call today to submit your questions, and we'll endeavour to go through as many of them as we can. The webinar will be recorded today and will be available afterwards in Tyrlawn Farm Life and our YouTube channel. So look, we'll run through the slides first, and then we'll do the Q&A session. The webinar will likely run till around 1:40, 1:45 today. And I encourage you again to put all your questions that you have into our speakers by text message. And if you include your name and county, that'll be ideal, just so we get a sense of where you're coming from. So the text number to text your questions is 086 180 3947. So without further ado, I'll hand over to yourself, Joris and Willie. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. And we'll start with the presentation, and we'll go into the calf rearing part of today's talk. And so look, from calf rearing, the beginning is everything. And it says that at the top of the slide there, because a calf that gets a good start in life is already well underway to achieve the targets. And within that, the first 12 weeks of a calf's life are absolutely vital. And a calf will encounter many challenges within that time period and beyond as well. Things like navel ill, calf scour, calf pneumonia, obviously, management practices like disbudding calves or transporting calves, be it to an out farm, be it to a contract rearer, but also weaning and changes in housing. And Tyrlawn has a very in-depth guideline booklet, the Dairy Calf Management Guidelines, which goes into a lot more depth on each of those challenges and how you can tweak what you do on farm to deal with those. But at the end of the day, achieving the target weights along the way is a very good indicator of good calf management practices, because achieving those target weights will set you on track to ultimately achieve the goals that you set out, whether it's a dairy replacement heifer or whether it's a beef calf. But from a very overall practical info point of view, it starts off with the colostrum 1-2-3 rule. So your first milking within 2 hours after birth has to go into the calf, and it needs to be a minimum of 3 liters. And from a colostrum point of view, and we've heard this 1-2-3 rule many times before, but colostrum, apart from very rich in nutrition, it's vital for the calf survival because it contains a very high level of immunoglobulins or antibodies. And that's basically the immune system that needs a kickstart. So a calf is born without any sort of antibodies, and it needs to receive all of them from the colostrum. So look at these immunoglobulins being as very disease-specific or custom-made ammunition for the immune system. And the colostrum is a stockpile of this that will last for 2, at most 3 months. But it is there to allow the calf to get past the gap of not having any of them, and then being able to produce them themselves. Once they get 2-3 weeks old, they start producing their own antibodies. So what you can do to help this is stick to the 1-2-3 rule of colostrum. After that, feed your calf well and maintain good hygiene. And this starts in the calving pen. Okay, good straw bedding, and then move on from there around the calves in the calf shed. Hygiene. What you can do is obviously help the animal's immune system. You can vaccinate the pregnant dams, or you can vaccinate the calves, depending on what vaccine you're using. And vaccinating the pregnant dams is another way of boosting your colostrum quality. You have to provide adequate housing for the number of calves that you have, and it needs to be suitable for your calves. And overall, you want to minimize stress. And one of the things that is a big stressor that pretty much every calf goes through is disbudding. And we've done a very nice video on how to go through disbudding and alleviate the stress as much as possible. And this and other videos you can find on the Tirlon Farm Life YouTube channel. But on the next slide, we'll actually go through a few of the stressors and how you can avoid them. So one of the first stressors for calves is actually temperature. And so calves that are younger than 3 weeks old, they have very little capacity to deal with cold weather. And the ideal temperature for those calves at the calf level, so when you get down to, I suppose, at knee level, knee height, is 15 degrees Celsius. So how do you help calves cope with that? Because during the winter, during the calving season, it very rarely is 15 degrees Celsius outside. Well, provide deep and dry straw. The calves can nest into that and they'll keep themselves warm. Straw is a very good insulator. And the low temperatures might require that a bit of additional milk is given, and Willie go into a detail of that as well, because the calves just burn off more energy to keep warm. And during real cold spells, I think calf jackets are a fantastic tool, and that you can put on the young calves and leave them on for a couple of days and nights until you get through the cold spell. Another stressor, like I mentioned at the previous slide, was the disbudding piece. And really what we're trying to do there is relieve the pain for the calf. So use your local anesthetic when you're disbudding calves of any age, right? Even if they're below the 2 weeks old, use your local anesthetic, but also go in with an anti-inflammatory pain relief. And that will help the calves cope with the discomfort of the disbudding for the rest of the day, and sometimes even the following day. And that avoids them losing their appetite, and therefore prevents a growth check, because a calf that doesn't eat for a day will experience a growth check. It's very impactful in those first couple of days for a calf. When you're grouping calves, try and do that based on their age, so based on their birth date, and then delay mixing of groups as long as possible. So creating larger groups, try and delay that as long as possible. The older the calves get, the more capable they are at fighting off disease. So the longer you can wait in mixing groups of different ages, the better that is for the calves. And sort of in the same theme is avoid shared airspace with older stock. So if you have calf housing that is under the same roof as maybe your young stock or even your older cattle, that's not an ideal situation, because a lot of especially respiratory viruses, etc., can travel very easily through the air and end up in the calf house or in the section of the house where the calves are being kept. And they have much less protection against these viruses, so it's much easier for them to pick up a pneumonia, for example. So having a separate calf house makes a big difference there. And then maintaining good biosecurity. Always think that when you're coming from older stock and going to younger stock, there's a high chance that you're bringing disease with you. So ideally, you go in reverse order and you start with the youngest animals and work your way up in the age groups, or make sure you have very clean clothes and dip your boots every time you go into the calf house. And overall, I would suggest that you actually stagger the stressors rather than doing everything in one go. So if you're tagging calves, giving them a vaccine, and disbudding the ball on the same day, that just compounds the effects of the different stressors. So if you can space out those stressors, that would be ideal. So for example, if you're going to transport a calf, that's a huge stress. Don't vaccinate it on the day that it's being transported. First of all, the vaccine won't be ready and working to cover them for the actual transport. And also, because of the stress of the transport, the vaccine mightn't actually fully work. So ideally, you would vaccinate these calves for, let's say, pneumonia 2 weeks before you're going to transport them. By then, the vaccine is fully operational, and the stress of the transport will have less of an impact. The same goes for, if you can, try and wean calves when they're already out of grass, so that weaning and a full change of diet isn't happening all at the same time. And wean gradually, and Willie will talk more about that. So over to you, Willie.
Thanks, Joris. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to talk about calf nutrition, and going to talk about milk replacer feeding and concentrate feeding as well. So the manufacturing feeding guidelines are suitable for general rearing systems for dairy and beef calves. So, you can feed higher levels. For accelerated growth rates, it's really a case of feeding additional 20% more powder. So this can be done by either increasing the feeding rates, in other words, the feeding volume, or increasing the mixing strength. And increasing the mixing rate, you're feeding 20% more volume, and by increasing the rate, you're feeding 20% more. So that 20% is the critical figure there. Ideally, introduce calf milk replacer abruptly, rather than mixing with milk. While calf milk replacer can be mixed with milk, there's better performance if the calf milk replacer is fed on its own overall. And calf milk replacers can be introduced at 4, 5, 6 days old. So calf is born, colostrum, and then transition milk for 3 or 4 days, and then moving on to calf milk replacer thereafter. For bought-in calves, it's critical that bought-in calves get electrolytes when they arrive. They will be dehydrated, and warm electrolytes in specifically. Milk temperature, again, 38 to 42 degrees, lukewarm. Again, if you're feeding cold powder and cold milk, the calf obviously has to warm it up. It reduces the calf's temperature. It has a cooling effect. So better performance from lukewarm calf milk replacer, 38 to 42 degrees Celsius. Avoid irregular intakes in varying amounts. Consistency is important. Routine is important. Feeding milk replacer at the same time every day is important. Get into a routine and stick to it, and get the calf acclimatized to that routine overall. So at a 12.5% concentration, that's the normal concentration. That's 125 grams of powder plus 0.875 liters of water, which makes up the full liter. At 15% concentration, that's 150 grams of powder plus 0.85 a liter, made up to a liter. And then for 20% mix, the concentration is 200 grams of powder plus 0.8 of a liter of water, made up to 1 liter. And that's important, that you're actually making up to 1 liter rather than adding 200 grams to 1 liter or adding 125 grams to 1 liter, because then you're diluting the concentration of the product. So 1 bag will make 160 liters of milk at 125 grams of powder per day at 12.5%. So again, just a few simple principles when mixing. Always add the powder to warm water. Again, don't have the water too warm. You don't want to damage that powder. Mix thoroughly. Good powders will mix instantly. They'll mix easily. That's what we call our products: easy mix, easy joule, easy beat. They do mix easily. And then top up with warm water. And again, it's warm. It's 40 degrees. It's not greater than that overall. Once a day feeding can be considered after 4 weeks of age. That's a very, very important point. Once a day feeding can be considered after 4 weeks of age. The animal needs to be 4 weeks of age. And again, as Joris mentioned earlier, during cold weather, maintenance requirement increases. It's just like with ourselves. We all eat more during colder conditions and colder weather. So again, just increase the feeding rate or the mixing rate, depending on what's practical. Keep milk powder fresh. It's a perishable product. Store bags in a cool place, reseal bags, and always use within the best before date. Also, a few points as regards milk and milk replacers. It's important to get the machine serviced before the season. And it's important to calibrate that machine as well. Two very, very important jobs. It's a critical piece of equipment, calf milk machine, and it's important that it works properly. Clean it out regularly. Clean it daily. Make sure there's no milk residues or buildup of residues. Keep the feeding area clean as well, and always check teats. Make sure teats are clean and not worn. The calf needs to suck the teat rather than milk flowing through the teat. Next slide. So just in relation to concentrates, and it's important to keep our targets in mind here. With a dairy heifer system, these heifers need to calf down at 24 months of age and be 90% of their adult birth weight at that stage. The same way in beef systems, whether it's steer beef, you need to finish those animals at 20 to 24 months. If it's heifer beef, they need to be finished at 18 to 20 months. If it's bull beef systems, you're looking at systems of 16 to 18 months. So good calf rearing, good calf milk replacer, good calf concentrates will all facilitate that purpose, to build strong, healthy calves with strong lungs, strong digestive systems, strong hearts, good livers, and so forth. So you can introduce a calf coarse feed from 5 days of age, product called Starter Calf. Again, just a few straightforward principles. Renew concentrate daily. It's important that concentrate is fresh, so feed on a little and often basis. Provide clean, fresh water at all times. Water ensures intake. If there's a restriction on water, or maybe water got a little bit dirty, clean it out. But water ensures intake. Provide a source of long fiber, hay or straw. Again, once the calf is eating 250 grams of starter calf, move on to the next stage. And our next stage is gold grain calf nut. And then when calves are eating at least 1 kilo before weaning, those calves can be weaned. And I suppose the essential part there is at least 1 kilo. If the calf is eating 1.25 kilos, 1.5 kilos, 1.75 kilos, all the better. The more concentrate the calf is taking, the better. The calf is a highly efficient converter at that stage of its life. So the more live weight that's got on at that stage, the more efficient, the more cost effective, the more profitable it is. Once grown and eating concentrates, calves can be early weaned from 8 weeks of age. Roughage is very, very important before weaning, during weaning, after weaning. Again, it's all about encouraging the calf to chew the cud, building that rumen. It takes a number of weeks to build that rumen, so it's important that you start early with concentrate and start early with roughage. And again, feed gold grain up till weaning to 2 weeks post-weaning. Now, some people would introduce calf rearing just before weaning, but it's important that any changes that are made to make them 2 to 3 weeks before weaning. That's the critical point there. Again, just to summarize, those animals need to do 3/4 kilogram from birth to calving. So that's doubling the birth weight within 8 weeks to wean them. Again, cholesterol 3-2-1, absolutely critical. And then go in with the first feed within 2 hours, and then follow up with the next feed of 2 to 3 liters 6 to 8 hours later, and then fall into the normal feeding routine then thereafter. Gain easy mixes, 25% protein, feed it at 750 grams per calf per day. Very palatable product, easy to mix, a number of health factors included, high vitamin E, so an excellent product through and through. Clean barley, straw or hay available. No silage. Silage doesn't have the texture that barley, straw or hay has, so avoid that until well after weaning. Again, start a calf, move on to gold grain, get them consistently eating the intake, do everything regularly, and then move on to gain, wean, and build when calves are at grass, or gain, rumen care calf can be fed as a transition feed as well. Okay, next slide.
Okay, after that, we'll move on to the transition cow and have a few words on health disorders and typical transition cow disorders. So the transition cow is, I suppose, the more delicate cow, or the most delicate cow that we have. It's the cow going from a very heavy pregnant cow to an early lactation cow. And you see a list there of a number of typical dry cow or transition cow disorders. So you have your retained placentas or retained fetal membranes, metritis or endometritis, you have ketosis, toxic mastitis, displaced abomasum, so the LDAs or RDAs, and then there is hypomagnesemia or grass tetany, or hypocalcemia or milk fever. And we'll just look in a little bit of detail on 2 of these. So we'll look at ketosis first there, and you see from that list, what you can see is it's actually that typical cow that develops ketosis. So early lactation cow, quite often the older cow with a high milk output, cows that were over-conditioned at calving, so they have too much fat, they can lose too much fat. And it's all because of a reduced feed intake. And you can see a lot of the points there actually coming back as your disorder. So they're very much linked. Another one that we'll look at is milk fever. And again, the same type of cow will come back. It's the cow that needs that sudden increase or every cow has a sudden increase in calcium requirements, but it's that typical cow, the slightly older cow, the higher yielding cow that can't meet the calcium requirements. So she can't mobilize enough calcium from what she's actually needing. And that causes cows to go down, and we've seen them all before. If you click there for the next, you'll see a picture. So we've all been there, the cow down with milk fever, and you can see the typical cow is that a cow that's a third lactation and older, the cow that was too fat at calving, probably some Jersey genetics or very high yielding cows, and any cow with a history of milk fever. And this now sort of sets the scene a little bit, and Willie will take us through how to manage those transition cows from a nutritional point of view.
Okay, thanks, Joris. So this is just a few points in relation to just before the cow calves. So this is the dry cow nutritional management, and I suppose with critical emphasis on the last fortnight before calving. So again, allow cows plenty of space. Don't overcrowd dry cows, particularly in the transition shed. Animals need to express themselves. They need room to exercise. You don't want, it's a new group of cows, new colleagues to get friendly with. So you don't want any rows, any bullying. And the only way to avoid that is to give them plenty of space overall. Pre-calver minerals, critical for the full duration of the dry period. Probably where people run into problems is with the first few cows that calf, because they're not getting enough minerals for long enough. And maybe the last few cows, because maybe they're getting minerals inconsistently. Maybe there's other jobs on, or they're not getting the full attention they should be. So feed dry cow minerals for the full duration of the dry period. Separate cows that are to calf within 10 to 14 days of calving. Again, proactivity, give them time to settle into the new transition group, into their accommodation, and because that's a very, very stressful period. I mean, there's still a lot of growth of the calf taking place for those last 10 to 12 days. So comfort is very much required. Keep ruminants full. Dry cows on the point of calving, they need very, very palatable forage, high dry matter, palatable, sweet forage, and keep it fresh, renew it daily, and again, provide clean and fresh water at all times. Avoid changing diets within the last week to 10 days. And that's why it's critical to get those cows moved into this group 10 to 14 days before calving. Again, consistency, routine, get them settled in well overall. No distractions, no upsets in this group. So you don't want them worrying about dark nights or cold weather or other stresses that can become evident to those animals at this very, very important time. So those diets in this critical transition period mean they need 14 to 16% protein. And that's why people feed some concentrate in this latter stages. It's energy dense because the calf is still growing. The rumen is being restricted a little bit. So that's where concentrate comes in. And the concentrate also allows the animal to adjust, allows the rumen to adjust to higher concentrate levels after calving. So again, we're talking a small amount of concentrate, 1 to 2 kilos, but it's a big help overall. And just a few things to watch out for really in this critical period. High potassium forages are really, really troublesome. So we see a lot of grass silage with high levels of potassium. Potassium knocks out magnesium. So it does increase the risk of milk fever. It makes the cow's system lazy. It makes her calcium mobilization process lazy. So she's more inclined to go down with milk fever. So avoid high potassium forages. Really, you need potassium levels in grass silage at 1.5% and preferably certainly less than 2%. Again, maize, silage, fodder beet, sugar beet, I mean, great feeds in themselves, but they are high calcium feeds. They are deficient in minerals and vitamins. They're not ideal for dry cows. Fodder beet and sugar beet are high in calcium, so again can make the calcium mobilization system lazy, can increase the risk of milk fever then afterwards, because the cow just isn't fit enough. She's just not ready to pull the calcium from her bones. So again, ideally avoid those feeds during the dry period. Again, brassica crops, high clover grass silage, red clover silage, these are all high potassium feeds as well and also present a risk. Fine, they can be fed at the early stages of the dry period, but once you get in within that month of calving, it's time to get back onto a more stable, a more settled, a more safe diet, a higher dry matter palatable forage. Straights, if people are trying to stretch silage to dry cows, straights are lower in minerals and vitamins, so they do need to be supplemented, and that's where again a good high magnesium pre-calver mineral with high levels of protected copper, zinc, manganese and selenium comes into play, and a high level of vitamin E also. Next slide. Okay, so now at this stage, the cow has calved, and just a few points to watch for there. And again, it's all about intake at this period and keeping the cow full. Fresh cows have a restricted rumen capacity. They will have a lower dry matter intake. Remember, this is a cow that you know, has been dry for 2 months. Her rumen will have shrank a little bit in size. The rumen is effectively a muscle, so it takes a few weeks for this muscle to expand again and get back to its more regular size. And that's why feeding some straw or in late lactation and feeding some straw during the dry period is important, because it doesn't allow the rumen to restrict too much. But it does take 6 to 8 weeks for the cow after calving to reach maximum dry matter intake capacity. Fresh cows require additional concentrate. Again, body condition, you know, you don't want them losing too much body condition. If that intake gap is filled, cows will lose too much condition. You know, they'll get thin, they will not milk well, and they will struggle to go back and calf. And again, just some recent trial work on that. You know, if a cow loses greater than half a body condition score versus a cow that loses 1 body condition score during the first 5 weeks of calving, those cows ovulate 15 days earlier and are served 15 days earlier. So don't let cows lose too much body condition. A half a condition score is about 25 kilos. So that's a nice safe level. But when you see cows losing 50 kilos, which is 1 body condition score and greater, that's when you run into issues with poor ovulation and poor conception rate. The next table, just again, some very, very clear work from Moore Park. And just if you look at the very bottom line of that, cows that calve down in less than 2.75 body condition score now, just a little bit thin, you know. And if you go across to the end of that bottom line, you see 37%. So those cows, if they calve a little bit thin and they lose a little bit too much in body condition, they have a conception rate to first service of only 37%. So that's you know, pretty poor. As against a cow that calves in with a body condition score of 3 and that loses a small amount of condition, 0.25 a body condition score, the conception to first service in this situation is 72. So a big contrast there between 37, where animals lose too much condition, and 72, where animals lose a minimal amount of condition. So again, fresh, clean water, fresh, clean forage. Keep the rumens full. You know, keep in mind that when the cow calves, there's a space created, there's a vacuum created inside within the animal. So you need to keep that full. You need to keep the rumen full. If you don't, you know, rumens, abomasums are trying to move around a little bit, and that's where you can get displaced abomasums occurring. So keep the animal full, dry palatable forage, and plenty of water around calving and after calving. Just be flexible with weather conditions. I mean, if you're moving animals out, you know, feed a high dry matter buffer forage. Grass is going to be soft, it's going to be leafy, it's going to lack texture. These animals are still only acclimatizing. So that's where the high dry matter buffer feed comes in. As regards feeding levels, just to take an example, if you've got a cow yielding 28 litres, on 70 to 75 DMD silage, that animal needs 7 to 8 kilos per day, you know, to milk that 28 litres, but also to stay in reasonable body condition and to have good butter fats and good proteins. And again, if the silage is lower in DMD than that, well, then those cows need additional concentrate just to make up the energy gap. Next slide.
That's us, Willie, and yours. Thank you very much. And look, I'll put the number up on the screen there again. We've had a good number of questions in, and thanks to each of you that have sent in questions for our speakers. We'll go through those now, but just a reminder, the text message number is 086 180 3947. And if you'd like to, and if it suits, some people are sending their names in, so that's great, but put in your name and county is ideal. There's a few questions, Joris, for you on ketosis. It seems to be a hot topic. So we've one from Bruce Thompson. Good afternoon, Bruce. In terms of ketosis, how can we monitor subclinical disease before it's a problem? Is measuring ketones in blood accurate? And someone else asks the question, can you test for milk, for ketosis from milk? And someone else has asked, just we'll take all the ketosis ones together, do Keystone boluses work? And that's from Tom.
Okay. Yes, testing blood for ketones is accurate. And what I would suggest is if you have a herd where maybe in the past you've had issues, or you're not 100% sure with, silage quality and everything else that's there, whether your cows are maybe at increased risk, what I would suggest is actually get your vet to take 12 blood samples from cows that are within a week away from calving, and another 12 cows that maybe are 2-3 weeks calved. And what they'll do is they'll check the blood samples for biomarkers for ketosis. So it's BHB is what's called beta hydroxybutyrate, but it's a ketone, and that will give you a very clear. There's another one, NEFAs, that they can test for as well, and those two combined will give you a very accurate reading and give you a good picture of what those cows are like. And so you're really looking at the cows where there is a huge drain on their energy, because the calf is growing very strongly still, as Willie said, in the last 2 weeks before calving, but also the colostrum is draining. The colostrum production that's being made in that last week is draining a lot of energy from the cow before calving, and then obviously after calving, her milk production kicks off. So that gives you a very accurate picture of what it's like, and you can make changes and you can make adjustments. The milk reading, obviously, that only works for cows that have already calved. But yeah, it's actually it's an easy one to do. You don't need to take a blood sample. You can take a milk sample and do a dipstick test on it. Or you can take a urine sample and you can use dipsticks for urine, keto sticks, actually, that people with diabetes would be very familiar with. It's maybe not as easy to catch a urine sample from cows that you're looking for, whereas a milk sample, it's very easy to get. But those give you a fairly good idea on individual cow levels. Obviously, a bulk tank sample is of no use to you. So yeah, you can certainly do that to screen a bit for who is high or low in ketones. On the Keystone, I think there are other ways of correcting a situation. Okay, so if you are in a situation where ketosis is happening, and maybe not even clinical, but you've noticed, maybe you've tested milk or urine, you see cows are a bit high in ketones, giving them propylene glycol, and most people probably know it as shonatol, that really helps, because it's a high energy drink, if you will, but the energy that's contained in it doesn't get burnt off in the animal's rumen by its own microflora, where other sugars, things like dextrose and so on, they actually would. So they don't actually get taken up as energy by the cow anymore at that stage. But propylene glycol actually gets converted into glucose inside the animal and gives it that energy boost. So you could very easily give cows that are maybe more at risk of ketosis 3, 4, 5 days of a bit of this propylene glycol every day. It's just down the throat. It's an oral, it's like a syrupy stuff. It tastes awful. So don't try thinking this is very sweet. But it actually really helps. It helps support the energy levels in those cows to get them to a point where they're actually consuming enough energy at that stage. Where the Keystone comes in is if you're really running into trouble and you're waiting for nutritional changes to take effect in your dry cow management. For those cows that are maybe too late in the dry period, where the corrections that you've now implemented won't be in effect long enough for them to get over or avoid ketosis, I'd say in those cows, maybe the only thing that might help is actually giving them a Keystone bolus. And I would still go in with your propylene glycol on those cows as well, just to give them that extra support. But it's a fairly narrow purpose, I think. It's those cows that are too close to calving for the nutritional changes of the dry cow that you're maybe doing because you've tested blood or milk or urine to take effect. That's those cows.
So in summary, Joris, it's put the problem right at source, but it can be a belt and braces while you're waiting for something else to come in. Well,
That's it. Yeah.
when do you give the Kexstone bolus? How long do you give it before calving yours?
Oh, it goes in. I think it's a week or so before calving. 2 weeks before calving, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I presume there's a bit of a window there.
There is a window, and it's a prescription product. So you
That's
need prescription from your vet. Yeah.
Okay, very good. There's more questions coming in, but Willie, I'll just jump to yourself. 2 questions, one from Jerry in Louth. What level of fodder beat is a safe level for dry cows? And another one with no name, is hay a good idea for dry cows?
Yeah, fodder beat, I'd be cautious on the fodder beat, 5 kilos, is about a kilogram of dry matter is enough for dry cows. Because again, it's all about cow body condition management. Fodder beat can be inclined to put condition on cows. And it's also just too high in calcium, but 5 kilos is a nice safe level, and just make sure that they're getting plenty of dry cow minerals along with that then. Just on hay, hay is a nice safe feed, doesn't really work for everybody. Not everybody can feed it. Not every summer allows you to make it. But yeah, and okay, I mean, there's hay and there's hay. There's hay at 60 DMD and there's hay at 70 DMD. Again, you need sort of nice quality hay. 70 DMD is the stuff, with lower quality hay, they just won't eat enough of it, and they could end up losing body condition on it. So just be careful on that one overall. And I suppose it's when we were talking about ketosis, cow body condition scoring is a big important element of that, and cow body condition scoring in late lactation, and being absolutely proactive on this thing, and keeping a close eye on cows during the dry period. A lot of cows with longer dry periods are inclined to put on too much condition, or inclined to be more predisposed to ketosis. So absolutely get the hands on and be proactive, and keep them fit rather than fat.
Yeah, no, that's always the message, isn't it, Willie? A question here, I've not really come across it before, but I'm sure you have, Willie. It's from Joe in Kilkenny, and he says over mineralization of heifers is causing problems at calving. Could you make a comment about this?
Yeah, like there's a balance to everything, and the same way with minerals. Now it depends. I suppose the one that I've come across occasionally is where people feed excess iodine, particularly to it may be in late lactation or during the dry period, and you can get very, very high iodine levels. And the unfortunate thing about iodine is the symptoms of excess are the same as deficiency. So people end up feeding more of it and more of it and more of it, and things gradually get worse, and there's no improvement. So yeah, if a mineral says 120 grams per animal per day, okay, there's a tolerance around that. There's a 10 to 15, maybe even a 20% tolerance, but certainly don't go double up on that. It's also a good idea to really determine what's in soil. So I guess get the grass analyzed, get blood analyzed, determine what's there, and then draw up a program from that. Otherwise, it's guesswork. You're shooting in the dark overall.
Yeah, and maybe that leads on to the next question. Joe in Westmeath is saying, I have silage that's tested high for potash. How much extra minerals do I need? Yeah, and the whole thing about potash is you really got to load up with magnesium. I suppose the general feeding rate for magnesium is 30 grams per cow per day during the dry period. But in this situation where phosphorus levels are maybe, I've seen phosphorus levels at 2.5, at 3%. At that stage, I will be going to 40 to 45 grams of magnesium per day. So again, just a full broad profile on the mineral of the analysis from grass, and if the potassium is that sort of in excess of 2.5, you really got to go with the 40 grams of magnesium per day. Yeah. There is a question in for yours on crypto, and there's also one on coccidiosis. When I take the two together, I have a history of crypto scar in the calf shed. Should I just go in with Halicure from day one? And that's from Tom.
Okay, and the cocci one.
Sorry, I'll give you that as well. Then. Okay,
yeah.
So every year my calves get coccidiosis when they're outside. sheds and shelter are disinfected. Should I use Vicoxin in the first days after going outside? So yeah, do you go in again with Vicoxin?
Yeah, it's I suppose slightly different between the two. I thought maybe it was the Coxie was indoors as well, but on the crypto, no, I wouldn't go in from day one with your Halocure or whatever product it is that you're using. Ultimately, crypto and Coxie, but crypto comes down to hygiene. And if you've started calving already, this is probably not as applicable to you. But if you're still a couple of days away from calving even, and you had crypto issues in the past, I still think you can go in to your calf housing and with a knapsack sprayer, use the right disinfectant, so something like a Cyclex that is specifically designed to kill the crypto that is surviving from last year. Right, it survives in little cracks of the concrete and so on, because your normal sort of disinfectants don't actually touch crypto. So you need something very specific. So something like Cyclex will do that job. And you can just go in and spray every gate, every wall up until the level where calves can lick it. Your drinkers, your feeders, all of those, but I would recommend you rinse it off, the drinkers and the feeders again, once it's been dried in. That's something you can do even if calving is going to start on the weekend. All right, so you still have time to do that. If you have more time, obviously you can take a slightly more in-depth approach and actually, steam clean and all that if you really want to, but you need time to let the shed dry again. So I think at this stage, the only thing you really can do is use a knapsack sprayer of the disinfectant. Going in with the Halocure then, yes, you have issues, and for most herds that builds up during the calving season. You need to be ready for it. But what I would recommend is make sure it's crypto. And there's some really handy little cow site or calf site, in this case, tests that you can actually do that will give you very quickly, based on a little bit of a dung sample from the calves, very quickly will tell you whether or not it is crypto. Because you may be using Halocure and it's actually not crypto, maybe it's rotavirus, right? So make sure that what you're using a treatment for is actually what's causing the scour in your calves. And then obviously once it starts, you'll have to do the Halocure, because there's no real way of going in with a full in-depth disinfection in the middle of calving season. It's not possible. But at the end of the calving season, you'll have to clear out the calf shed, fully wash it out, power wash it, let it dry, and go in with your disinfectant again, and just dryness. Dry. That's what actually kills crypto. On the Coxie side, so the question is, once they go out, so it sort of depends how quickly after going out the calves actually develop this coccidiosis scour, right? If they develop the coccidiosis scour in the first week or so, first 10 days of being turned out, they actually picked it up inside still, and maybe the stress of being moved outside is what triggers it and weakens them a little bit. But if they develop this scour once they've been out 10 days, 2 weeks, it more than likely is actually a coccidiosis they picked up outside. And the likes of your Vicoxin and so on, the treatments, there's actually no point in going in until they have been exposed, because it's the product is designed to kill the coccidiosis once they're inside the calf. It's not like a vaccine where you can prevent disease. They already need to be infected before the treatment actually works. So what you could do again is wait to see when it actually happens. If you can do a test on a dung sample to see if it is indeed coccidiosis and not something else that's causing the scour, again, to make sure that you're treating the right disease. But you'd probably have, I would say, 2 weeks before the problems would start. And so you wouldn't have to go in with your Vicoxin until the calves are at least 2 weeks outside.
Yeah, perfect. No, very good, Joris. I'm going to keep moving because we've actually a lot of questions and we're at 1:45 already. So just a couple for you, Willie, but actually Joe from Kilkenny has come back and he added this piece because he'd asked the question before about over-mineralization of heifers. So he said, vet recommended reducing pre-calving minerals to heifers by 50% of the recommended feeding rate, as he's seen an increase in calving issues due to excess minerals in recent years, particularly selenium, right? So selenium seemed to be the problem there, but is that a widespread issue?
No, I'd say it's not widespread, Shane. It may be just specific geographies that would have high selenium soils, and it could be just those specific areas, and there's a few of them around Kilkenny, in particular South Kilkenny, along by the River Shore.
Yeah. Come here, one more on dry cow minerals. I haven't put their name in. Everyone says they have the best dry cow minerals minerals? How do I compare different minerals? Is the cheapest one just as good?
Like, I suppose it's like everything in life, everything has a value and a worth, and generally you pay for what you get at the end of the day. Generally I mean, a good mineral needs a high level of magnesium. It needs to be 26% magnesium, to get in that protection against milk fever. It needs to have some phosphorus included. It needs to be 2.5–3% phosphorus. It needs to have the protected minerals, and this is where the real difference in mineral comes about. There's a protected selenium product called Celplex, which costs roughly about €100 a ton to include. But yet, we see too many herds with retained afterbirths, with weak calves, with dirty cows afterwards, and selenium is a critical solution in that sort of situation. The same way, something with a high level of bioplex copper, bioplex zinc, bioplex manganese. And there are different types of protected minerals, but from the research we've seen, the bioplex minerals seem to be they work really, really well. The trial work and research behind them is really, really strong. So again, you can get cheap protected minerals, but not all minerals are the same. Same way, a good dry mineral needs to have plenty of vitamins A, D, and E, and particularly vitamin E. Vitamin E is all about immunity. Vitamin D, we spoke a bit about milk fever. Vitamin D is critical for milk fever prevention. So it's probably those 8 or 10 things all added together, and when you put them all together and you use the proper type of mineral, you will see big differences in the price of minerals. But yet a mineral is a small cost, with a massive return for what you get out of it. If you can prevent one case of milk fever, if you can prevent one case of retained afterbirth, it's paying for itself time and time and time again. And also, like mineral supplementation during the dry period, that's really setting you up for the breeding season. If you get minerals in the dry period wrong, you're going to have a very, very difficult breeding season.
Yeah, and it's the subclinical piece as well. Like if you've got cows with milk fever, you've got loads more with issues, and then you've dirty cows in 3 or 4 weeks' time, and you're wondering why. And it's just about keeping things right, and it's a small cost in the big scheme of things. So go with the quality is the summary there. Joris, Joe in Wicklow had 4 cows with displacements last year. How can he prevent it this year?
Well, I think we've mentioned a good few of the pieces that you can do to prevent, because a displaced abomasum is sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? It's the most dramatic expression of a transition cow problem. And for all the cows with a displaced abomasum, there's probably a handful that maybe have a bit of milk fever subclinical, or that have a level of ketosis, maybe some ascites. It all adds up, and there's just a few where it just gets on, it gets too much for those cows, and they develop that displaced abomasum. So I think Willie mentioned it before as well. Keep the cows filled, fill their rumens as quickly as possible. And that will prevent a lot of displaced abomasums in itself. Make sure your cows have the access to feed in the first place, that it's palatable feed, and that they can keep eating, keep their energy levels up, but also just pure volume that they fill up very well, and prevent as much as possible the other diseases. So try and avoid difficult calvings. If cows are lame, treat them. Try and avoid that ketosis, try and avoid milk fever. And, and there's something, and some of you may have noticed, there's actually a little bit of a shortage at the moment on the calciject. It's just supply is very slow. And so if in the past you have relied a lot on giving cows calciject bottles, you may not have that option every week of this calving season because of the supply issues. So look at alternatives. Look at something like a calcitrase bolus or a calcitrase liquid that you give to the cows to prevent milk fever, rather than letting the calf down and then just use the calciject to cover the problem. So you may have to look at a few of those underlying issues, because the displaced abomasum itself is only, like I said, the tip of the iceberg. It's only the effect of the underlying issues.
Oh, that's excellent, Joris. You've actually answered Kevin's question before I got to ask it. He was talking about bottled calcium aren't available. So calciject is not available, but there are other alternatives there. So that's great. One last one, or it's one last topic, 2 questions, and finish with yourself then after Willie, but Joris, how much does local anaesthetic cost? You were talking about that for the disbudding, and then how long do you wait after you give the local anaesthetic, and how long does it last? I presume if they're doing a group of calves together is probably the question there.
Yeah. Local anesthetic is dirt cheap. Okay, it costs very little. I'd say the syringe costs more than the local anesthetic, right? So a local anesthetic is really like €0.50 is probably the cost of the local anesthetic for a calf, right? So don't skimp on it. And even the anti-inflammatory might be twice that, but maybe it's €1 per calf. Like it's the products are not the cost. It's obviously the effort, the time. And that's where the question is actually a very good one, Shane, on how long will it last? Because from a labor perspective, it might be much easier to do 10 calves with the local anesthetic and then go back to the first one and start disbudding that one. Because obviously the local anesthetic needs a couple of minutes before it's actually working, compared to when you go to the dentist. If the dentist needs to pull your tooth, they inject the local anesthetic and then wait a little while. You don't want them to start pulling that tooth straight away, right? And then the same applies for calves that are being disbudded. So actually, you'll get an hour out of that local anesthetic, no problem. 90 minutes, maybe even at that, right? At most. But you do have time to do, let's say, 10 calves with the local anesthetic. Go back to the first one. By then, it's had 3-4 minutes maybe to work. It's desensitized. You can disbud that calf, and by the time you come to number 10, its local anesthetic is still working. And if you then give it the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, that will give the pain relief once the local anesthetic is worn off after the 90 minutes, and will give it 24 hours or even a bit longer for some of them. Give it that a bit of numbness.
That's great, Joris. And look, I know we're nearly 5-2 there, but we will just take one last question, and it's one that's probably going to come across. Actually, there's another question just came in there, so we might have another one. It's one that might be across a number of farmers. So this person, no name, is not going to use milk replacer this year. They're going to be feeding raw milk to calves. Could you talk more about feeding that, as we won't be feeding the milk replacer this year because of banding? So that's the nitrates piece, isn't it? So Willie, milk feeding, raw milk feeding.
Yeah. Again, Shane, whole milk, it needs to be acidified. That's a very, very important part of it. It's you're going to feed quite similar volumes to what you feed with whole milk. With milk replacer. Again, you'll build them up to maybe sort of 6 liters. Start them off there at the 2 liters. After 3 to 4 days, move them to the 4 liter in a day. After another 3 to 4 days, 5 days, move them on to the 6 liters. But the key thing is acidification, and also a key thing is cleanliness. Like, milk is a very perishable product. I mean, there's going to be spills, so clean up the feeding area. Make sure your feeders and your teeter feeders, or however you're feeding it, be it in teeter buckets or however, make sure that they are clean and make sure that they are sterilized, because dirty teats and unsterilized teats do spread disease. Again, same principles as with milk replacer. Clean fresh water, concentrate at an earlier stage, roughage as well. But I mean, whole milk needs to be acidified. It's going to be slightly lower in minerals and vitamins as well. All those acidifiers carry some minerals and vitamins. So and again, the calf needs every help it can. Milk needs to be digested in an acidified environment. So if you acidify the milk, you're giving the calf a good start there, a good helping hand there. No,
great advice, Willie. And I suppose, look, from a disease perspective and lots of management and lots of other bits and pieces, milk replacer is a great solution for calf feeding, but understandably some people will want to feed whole milk this year. So that's great guidance. Look, guys, we've the last question was already answered. I think we've covered it off. So look, thanks very much to everyone for joining the webinar today and for your participation with the questions. There's nearly more questions, and I spend more time on questions than slides. So good all around. As we know, look, every farm is different, and everyone will need different solutions for your own scenarios. So look, get in touch with your local tier line advisor, who'll be able to work through the solutions for your own farm. And look, I hope everyone has got some good guidance and good management tips from the webinar today for the spring season ahead. We'll have a webinar tomorrow again at lunchtime on milk quality and also on the nitrates changes that are coming in as well. So look, to close our webinar today, thanks to everyone for joining and participating, to our speakers, to Willie and to Joris, and also to James, Brenton and Tom, who've been working in the background to deliver the webinar. So thanks very much for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow, and safe farming.